Good morning, I'm harleysch from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for September 19th, 2024. If you think the picture's a little bit crooked, you're right. I'm having a little trouble here with my technical side of things, but I'll get it worked out sooner or later. But crooked may be the picture, but not as crooked as the present administration. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is this whole question of whatever happened to common sense. Common sense in terms of policy, but also in terms of shaping the attitudes of the common person. Now, what we're seeing in the last 24 hours is just how bad the US government is, the Biden government is. It's discredited in the eyes of the world. Once again, the US stood virtually alone before the UN General Assembly, which took up a measure about a commitment to making Israel end its unlawful control or unlawful occupation of the territory of the Palestinians. And the resolution called for this to happen within the next 12 months. Now, the vote on this resolution was 124 in favor of it, that is, Israel having to give up the occupation, 14 against, including the United States and Israel. And the argument here from the United States was that this is ganging up on Israel. Now, there was an International Court of Justice ruling which reaffirmed the idea that the occupation is illegal. They've already passed numerous resolutions on this, multiple resolutions, but constantly rejected by Israel and by the United States. The most recent, the International Court of Justice ruling on July 19th, in which they say the case for a charge of genocide against Israel is plausible, and therefore Israel must stop the killing. But the killing continues in Gaza and elsewhere. In fact, in the last 48 hours, Israel has launched an assault using explosives in pagers and other kinds of electronic devices in Lebanon. And thousands of these pagers were affected. There have been 20 or so deaths so far, many people sent to the hospital. People lost their vision, their arms, legs. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Over 3,000 of these pagers went off. Now, there was no condemnation of this from the United States. But this was terrorism, random terrorism. And it's clear that this is probably part of the plan that Netanyahu has to invade Lebanon, and that this was preparation. Now, here's the question. US officials repeatedly cite the rule of law and the rules-based order as at the heart of what US policy is. But then they show contempt for the rule of law, because the rule of law is that the occupation of Palestinian territory is unlawful. But the US won't rule on that, won't act on that. The idea of a rules-based order. What rules-based order allows a powerful nation to kill thousands, over 40,000 citizens? Because given that Israel has jurisdiction over that, they're killing their own population, children, and then refusing to take any responsibility for it. So then you add to that the so-called war on terror. But this was an act of terrorism, a war crime. The use of exploding pagers to take out a section of Hezbollah. So the US is exposed at the UN as a serial violator of the rules-based order. The US has lost its credibility completely. Now, there's another issue, democracy. The US says we support democracy against the authoritarians, and then continues to arm Ukraine in a proxy war against Russia. The Ukrainian government is illegitimate. It's not a democratic government. It came to power in a coup, which the US was largely involved in sponsoring. Zelensky canceled the elections that he was required to have by the Ukrainian constitution They've shut down opposition parties and opposition newspapers. So where's the rule of law there? Then you have censorship in the United States. American officials go around the world lecturing people about freedom of the press and free speech, and then shut it down in the United States. Most recently, the attack on RT, the Russian publication, Meta and Facebook are the latest to say they're going to ban RT. Then you have the Ukrainian Center for Combating Disinformation working together with the British deputy head of the Foreign Office to talk about suppressing free speech and to make sure that disinformation from Russia doesn't shape the environment. But in fact, they're mapping out joint efforts to silence opposition to the Ukraine war. Where is the democracy? This is a violation of one of the most profound constitutional provisions. So the question then comes back to this: what's wrong with the United States? We have a corporate imperial system. And at the top, it's run by private interests that benefit financially from supporting these wars and shutting down free speech in opposition to these wars. But what are the people? Where are the American people? Where are the people of Western Europe? Are they tolerating these kinds of policies? Well, of course they are, in violation of what is the tradition of American critical thinking, where the idea is you stand up for the truth. You ensure that government policy is based on the truth and transparency, and you have a disdain for going along to get along. The idea that when you know it's true, you don't submit because the powerful people say the opposite. You stand up and fight for what's true, and not just fight the powerful people, but go out and organize the population. Now, LaRouche wrote about this in a short document called Defense of Common Sense. He was jailed for refusing to submit to the permanent bureaucracy of the Justice Department, the intelligence community, refusing to submit to the lies and to the corruption. And he wrote this essay in Defense of Common Sense. I'm just going to read a couple short passages to give you a sense of what LaRouche is discussing. In the very beginning, and this is, by the way, from April 1989, in the very beginning, he says, "From the prison in which the politician's career expires, the influence of the statesman is raised toward the summits of his life's providential course." In other words, risking going to prison is nothing. In fact, it can create a statesman because you rise above the people who jailed you. Now, and then defining what he means by common sense, and he doesn't simply mean horse sense, he writes the following: "Whatever common sense should mean, the included term common signifies that a society were unlikely to attain successful survival unless common sense was more or less commonplace. That is a view not inconsistent with an opinion expressed by some notable founders of our federal republic, that a certain quality of universal public education were indispensable to ensure future generations capable of preserving the freedoms which had been won recently at such great peril and expense." So the idea that he's talking about there is that common sense is the way in which citizens communicate profound ideas about self-governance. And there may be disagreements. That's why you have debate. That's why you have dialogue. The purpose of a free press is to allow that debate to occur. But what we're seeing today under Biden and the war hawks that control both parties and the media is a suppression of that instinct for common sense, to the extent that people are afraid to express their own opinions for fear that they might suffer the fate of Scott Ritter or Tulsi Gabbard or any number of people who have been at the wrathful end of the Department of Justice permanent bureaucracy, like Lyndon LaRouche, who was jailed because of his commitment to provide a common sense attitude and view to the people of the country when he ran for president. What we're seeing with Biden and the war hawks is they're destroying the credibility of the United States, even as they go around the world preaching so-called American values. They're risking nuclear war to preserve a system which benefits the few, not the many, which is in opposition to the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. There's no common sense there. But by common sense, we mean standing up and fighting for what is known to be the good, even if it's in opposition to the general opinion, the popular opinion. So I'd encourage people to see if you can get a copy of LaRouche's book, In Defense of Common Sense, and start acting to build up common sense in the population. Join our campaign, the International Peace Coalition. We'll be having another Zoom call tomorrow at 11 a.m., Friday at 11 a.m. And I'll have a link at the bottom of the description section so you can join it, so that you can become a fighter to restore the principle of common sense to the American people.